Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Ukraine is under its heaviest bombardment in weeks. Over 600 drones and missiles launched overnight, killing civilians in Lviv and Transcarpathia. At the same time, diplomatic manoeuvring intensifies. Hungary has offered Budapest as a venue for peace talks, even as President Zelenskyy signals reluctance given Prime Minister Orbán's closeness to Moscow. With US, Russian and European leaders weighing in, where will negotiations happen and on what terms? Well, to discuss these issues, we're joined by Professor Taras Kuzio from Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Professor, welcome back to TVP World. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I want to get into the topics I've just raised in just a second, but before we do that, a new post on Truth Social by President Trump, and I'd like to get your view on it. I quote. He says, "It's so very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sport that has fantastic defense but is not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning. It is like that with Ukraine and Russia." And then he says some other stuff, and then he says, "Interesting times ahead." And the picture, which shows quite a belligerent body posture towards Putin that goes with that. Your initial reaction to the post and the picture?
Well, I don't consider Donald Trump, who bribed a doctor so he wouldn't be sent to Vietnam, to be a great military expert. So I actually don't. And to be quite honest, when I read many of his social media posts, I have to put them through Google Translation because they don't make any sense in English at all. And this is probably similar here. The reports we are hearing this afternoon are that Donald Trump is maybe not completely, but halfway moving away from the peace process, which to me, which I just posted on the social media X, means that the two summits we had in Alaska with Trump and Putin and in Washington with European leaders, Zelenskyy and Trump, were a complete waste of time because nothing has been agreed. And there's been actually a lot of obfuscation and misreporting by, especially by Donald Trump's representative, Stephen Witkoff. So in some ways, I think it's a good thing that Trump's moving away from this peace process because he actually throws in a lot of confusion into it. And I'm hoping that's what's happening now.
All right, so you see this simply as a confusing tactic, has no real substance. What then do you see the underlying path for peace to be with Trump out?
Well, Trump has never approached the peace process in the correct manner. This, I'm sure, will be what every historian will be writing in the future. I mean, he's never tried to apply pressure on Putin, either using energy, economic, or military means, to force him to moderate his demands. So the Putin team, the cabal, have the same hardline maximalist position they've had since spring 2022, and therefore. It was never clear to most of us what was, if anything, Trump's strategy. I mean, he's, for example, on many ridiculous occasions, he's blamed Ukraine for the war, as well as, of course, Joe Biden, Obama, everybody else, except for him. So I don't see any peace process actually in the making at the moment.
No, but I'm saying without Trump in the picture, does Europe have a...
Well, there was no peace process with Trump, and there's no peace process now.
Okay, so you're saying basically the war continues as is, and there is no way forward at all?
Yes. Well, the only way to get Russia to the negotiating table with moderated demands, not its maximalist demands of Ukraine's capitulation, is to apply a range of different greater pressure on Russia. Now, Trump has been unwilling to do that for whatever reasons. We could debate that for hours. So it's now up to the Europeans, and that would be a range of pressure, military, economic, energy. Ukraine itself is applying pressure on Russia. Just in the last month, Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil refinery have knocked out a fifth of its oil refining capacity. You can find on social media a video of chaos at Russian petrol stations with massive queues. So Ukraine's going to continue that. With the help of Europeans, I think that will be very helpful in maybe forcing Russia to the negotiating table. But I don't see Trump, his approach, as ever having done that. So I believe that Trump out of the picture is actually a positive thing, because
understood. So
there was just simply a lot of smoke and mirrors.
So do you believe that there should be at least a bilateral, if not a trilateral meeting, that is between Zelenskyy, Putin and Trump, planned, organised? And if so, what would you like the outcome to be?
Well, I'm sure every Ukrainian would like the outcome to be the end of the war, even for a
But on what grounds, Professor?
Well, that's the problem, that there is no possibility of finding a middle ground. I mean, both sides have to compromise. Russia doesn't have a compromise position. It has a position, Ukraine, you have to surrender to us. And Ukraine will never do that. So, I've never thought that Putin would agree to a bilateral summit with Zelenskyy. Why not? Because that would accord Zelenskyy legitimacy in the eyes of Russia. Russian propaganda and disinformation continuously, including Foreign Minister Lavrov yesterday and today, that Zelenskyy is not the real leader of Ukraine. So having a summit with Zelenskyy would accord him legitimacy. It would also accord Ukraine legitimacy as an equal partner to Russia. Russia would never agree to it. So there will never be a Putin-Zelenskyy summit. I think this was all simply something that was dreamt
Is there a role for European leaders? Is there a role for European leaders to mediate in that case, if not Trump?
Well, yes, but European leaders need to grow some strength and to stand up to Putin, as well as to Trump. They haven't really been doing that. They've become tougher, yes, in the last few years, but as we saw in the summit in Washington, European leaders, and Zelenskyy, but he has no choice, are simply playing to Trump's ego, flattering him all the time, telling him how great he is. I think it's about time European leaders said to Trump, your approach is completely wrong, and we are not getting anywhere. They seem to be afraid of doing that for all sorts of reasons, of course. Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused here because on the one hand you're saying Trump is moving away.
You're not the only one.
Trump is moving away from the peace process, and that's a good thing. And so my question really was, if he is moving away, and it is a good thing, is there someone who's going to step into his shoes and mediate between the two sides?
The only mediation that can be possible is by forcing Russia to the negotiating table with moderated demands. That is only possible not by having summits in Alaska, it's by pressuring Russia through different means, military, economic, and energy. Until that happens, until the Europeans do that, and together with the Ukrainians, there'll be no peace process to talk about. There'll be no ability to get Russia to the negotiating table.
All right, so secondary sanctions
at the moment.
Secondary sanctions first, and then we'll see about peace talks.
I think you have to be tough on Russia to moderate its demands. It's never going to remove all of Russia's demands, but the moment Russia sticks to maximalist demands, which no European leader and Ukraine will ever agree to. So we don't have a process at the moment. Trump was, I think, simply flying high. There was no real substance to what he was talking about.
Okay. Now, secondary sanctions is something that the Europeans are calling for very strongly, and obviously one of the countries that would be hit by those is India. However, the Indian foreign minister is currently in Moscow having talks about the combined Russian-Indian response. It doesn't look as though Putin is terrified of secondary sanctions. He'll simply double down on his relationships with India, with China, with Iran, maybe even North Korea for more weaponry. Keep sailing his shadow fleet, and nothing really changes. Isn't that a risk? Isn't that a possibility?
Well, yes and no. The two key countries are not North Korea and Iran. Iran's been battered by Israel. The two key countries are China and India. The Indians are obviously not afraid of Trump. They've started again to buy Russian oil. The Europeans have not, unlike Trump, the Europeans have not imposed sanctions on India. Why? Why not? Why have the Europeans and the Trump team not imposed sanctions on China? China is the biggest purchaser of Russian oil. China is the biggest enabler of Russia's military machine, not North Korea or Iran. It's China. I think there's a weakness and a lack of political will to go after China here, both in the Trump team and in the Europeans. Why, I don't know. Maybe they want to continue trading with China. But China is the key country here. India's second place. And nobody's going after China, really.
Right, so no secondary sanctions on the table, in your opinion, are going to make any practical difference anyway. So,
well, Trump's threats for those have never materialized, have they?
No, they haven't. And instead, we had a meeting in Alaska when the deadline was supposed to kick in. So, what next, Professor? What next?
I think the next, and I think it's going to be the Ukrainians which will force the pace on the battlefield. Ukraine is now very far ahead in producing its own long-range missiles. It's producing a huge number every day, and medium-range drones. And it's going to continue to destroy Russia from within. For example, Russia's energy sector. Russia is a third world country. Its only exports were military products and oil and gas. That's it. And there's already a crisis happening inside Russia. I think that's the Ukrainian aim. I think the Europeans will follow on what the Ukrainians are doing. I mean, the Europeans are assisting Ukraine in doing that. The Trump team, they're kind of in the background. I mean, they're not providing any weapons. They're selling weapons. They're selling weapons to the Europeans or giving them to Ukrainians with a 10% markup. I mean, They want to profit from this bloodshed.
Yeah. Well, sadly, that is the weapons industry globally. But, Professor, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience.
Thank you.
Have a good evening and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.